the defeating Tyrus. But if you look in history, he never did go after Jerusalem and besiege it. It says, and Tyrus did build herself a stronghold, and heaps of silver as the dust, and fine gold as the mire of the streets. Behold, the Lord will cast her out, and will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured with fire. And that power in the sea was that island city and stuff, and of course that happened. But God, he said, I will encamp about mine house because of the army, because of him that passeth by, and because of him that returneth, and no oppressor shall pass through them any more, for now have I seen with mine eyes. See, but the thing is, this is a twofold, because he was there, and Alexander the Great and all that. The Grecians didn't go after Jerusalem, but the Romans did. So I think that's a twofold, because he encamped around his house because of the army, and then of course later on the oppressors will not be able to pass through them anymore. So I believe that's a twofold thing, and that's a futuristic thing. But it says, rejoice greatly, O daughters of Zion. Shout, O daughters of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And that, of course, is a foreshadow of Christ when he came the first time, and they rejected him. And this one, it says, when I have bent Judah for me, filled the bow with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man. And the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrows shall go forth as lightning, and the Lord shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with whirlwinds of the south. And the Lord of hosts shall defend them, and they shall devour the subdue with slingstones, and they shall drink and make a noise as through wine, and they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar. And the Lord their God shall save them in that day as the flock of his people, for they shall be as the stones of a crown, lifted up as an ensign upon his land. And of course this is talking about Greece. So this could be talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, because he persecuted the Jews, and so maybe that could be talking about him, because Alexander the Great didn't go through Jerusalem and all that, but is the kingdom divided into 4 kingdoms, and of course Antiochus came from the Grecians and stuff from I believe Syria, and that part of the divided kingdom, and persecuted the Jews, and of course they was delivered from it because obviously the guy's dead. So that being said, and then God says, and I will strengthen the house of Judah, and will save the house of Joseph, and I'll bring them again to place them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off. For I am the Lord their God, and will hear them. And they of Ephraim shall be like a mighty man, and their heart shall rejoice as through wine. Yea, their children shall see it, and be glad. Their hearts shall rejoice in the Lord. I will hiss for them, and gather them, for I have redeemed them, and they shall increase as they have increased. And I will sow them among the people, and they shall remember me in far countries, and they shall live with their children and turn again. And I'll bring them again also out of the land of Egypt, and gather them out of Assyria, and will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them. And I will strengthen them in the Lord, and they shall walk up and down in his name, saith the Lord. So this is talking about him gathering his people that's scattered off, and there's still scattered off, a lot of them are. Now this is a rejection of a shepherd. There is a voice of howling of the shepherds, for their glory is spoiled, and the voice of roaring of young lions, for the pride of Jordan is spoiled. This is a future fall of Jerusalem, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord, but lo, I will deliver the men every one to his neighbour's hand, and in the hand of his king, and they shall smite the land, and out of their hand will I not deliver them. And I will feed the flock of the slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took you into me 2 staves, the one I called Beauty, and the other I called Bands, and I fed the flock. And I took my staff, even Beauty, and cut it asunder, that it might break my covenant which I had made with all the people. And it was broken in that day, so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. So this is something that's going to happen. I mean, it could have happened already, but I believe it's something that's going to happen. Because there's certain ones that of the Jews that will not turn to him, and then there's certain ones that will. So obviously the ones that waited on him is going to be the remnant of him. But then he says, For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young ones, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that standeth still, but he shall eat the flesh of the fat, and tear their claws in pieces. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock! The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye, and his arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. So this is obviously talking about a future shepherd that they're going to have in their future, a leader. Now the burden of sea, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. In that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth shall be gathered together against it. All the earth is going to be gathered against Jerusalem. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness, and I'll open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. In that day will I make governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in the sheaf, and they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. The Lord shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of his inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him, as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadarimon in the valley of Megiddon. And the land shall mourn every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, and the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. And he says, In that day shall a fountain be opened up to the house of David, and then to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanliness. And of course this was him dying on the cross. And then it shall come to pass in that day, that saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and it shall be no more remembered, and I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off, and die, but the third part shall be left therein. And I'll bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried, and they shall call on my name. And I'll hear them, and I'll say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. So, of course, it's something future now, because there's going to be a remnant, Not all the Jews that live today are going to be a part of that inheritance. Only a remnant of them will be. It says, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from that day from the city. Then the Lord shall go forth and fight against those nations, and when he has fought in the day of battle, and his feet shall stand that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst of thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountains shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah. And the Lord of my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. So there's going to be battle, and they're going to be overcome, but he's going to come. It shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark. It shall be as one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in that day that waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. Then he's going to smite the enemies with plagues. And Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold, silver, and apparel, and in great abundance. Then the ones that are left from the battle, when it's time to keep the feast of the tabernacle, they don't come. Then he'll cause a drought, and it won't rain on their land. And that day there shall be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord, and the pots of the Lord's house shall be like bowls before the altar. Yet every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and see therein. In that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord. And the Canaanite, of course, is unrighteous, uncircumcised, unholy, unbelieving. And again, it talks about in his day there's still going to be sacrifices. And I'm not sure what that is, because it hasn't happened yet. I guess whenever it happens, we'll know. Basically, I can't tell you about the future, because all you get is a certain perception of what it's going to be like and the things that's going to happen. And after that, you don't know until it happens. It's a faith, believing in faith that it's going to happen and he's in control of it all. But that is Zechariah. It shows a lot of what's going to come in the future. It's twofold. A lot of it was, first portion of it is basically about what's going, them rebuilding the temple and stuff, and worshiping the Lord, him being there and watching over them. But of course, Romans come and all that stuff later on in their lives. But that is Zechariah, and I hope it wasn't scattered too much, but at least you kind of got to grasp an idea of what the book is about. And that is it for that book.